Welcome back. All right. So when we're looking at the West, we're seeing some chaos right now in terms of who's in the playoffs, who's not. And of course, we can try to figure out who's going to end up making it in the end. It's going to be interesting because we're a little over a month out, and we got a quarter of the season left for Dallas. They got 20 games left still. So in the West, I think we can go ahead and say that the Colorado Avalanche, St. Louis Blues, Minnesota Wild, who are 1 through 3, the Nashville Predators, who are the first wild card, very likely to make the playoffs. Very unlikely they fall out. In the Pacific, you got Calgary first. They're not falling out. And I don't think LA is either. I think LA's recent play has allowed them to stay away from this area where it's kind of up in the air. So we'll start with the Oilers. The Oilers have 75 points. They're third in the Pacific. But who they have to worry about is Vegas. Vegas is 3 points behind them. And what's interesting is that the battle for third could mean you either finish third in the Pacific or you miss the playoffs altogether. That is quite possible. So for the Oilers, 64 games, 35 wins, 24 losses, 5 overtime or shootout losses, 75 points. They have 29 regulation wins. So they do have that tiebreaker on anybody else on the board. That helps them out. Their home record, 19-12. Their away record, 16-12-5. So they're better at home than on the road, but both of those records aren't bad. Their goal differential is a plus 13. Over their last 10 games, they're 5-3-2. The Oilers have been playing, I think, well enough. They should be able to stay above the playoff line. If you get 12 points every 10 games, you should be fine. Their power play, 24.6%. Their penalty kill is not great, but none of these teams have a penalty kill above 80%, which is interesting to me. 75.9% for the Oilers. Their upcoming games, they're at home against San Jose. Then they go and play in Calgary. They're at home against Arizona, LA, St. Louis. And then they go out on the road. They do the California swing through all 3 California teams. They come home and play Colorado. Then they go to Minnesota and Nashville. That's an interesting 3-game spot right there, the Colorado, Minnesota, Nashville games. But the brunt of it is 8 of the 18 games that they play are against teams that are not currently above the playoff line. So this includes Vegas. Vegas is not above the playoff line. Now, they do have 1 game left against Vegas. It's in Edmonton. So they could potentially be a team that helps to put Vegas out or puts Vegas back into the picture. Vegas wins that game, things could change. They do have 2 games in hand on the Vegas Golden Knights as well. So for the Oilers, I still think they have the best chance of, they end up making it, right? Then you have Dallas, the number 2 wild card as of last night. They have a goal differential of -1. They're 6-4 in their last 10. So over their last 10, 12 points. Again, if they could put up 12 points every 10 games, that'd give them 24. So 97 points at the end of the season. That would probably be enough for them to end up making the playoffs. And the regulation wins number is 23. So that's a problem because they have fewer regulation wins than anybody else that they would be fighting for that final playoff spot. Their overall record of 35-24-3. They've played 2 less games than Edmonton. They've got 2 less overtime or shootout losses than Edmonton. So they're in good shape, but again, they're not chasing Edmonton. They're chasing Nashville, they're chasing Minnesota because they can't have any effect on Edmonton, who are third in the Pacific. So for Dallas, their home record is excellent. Best home record on the board at 21-8-1. But their road record is arguably the worst at 14-16-2. Now, it's been getting better lately. The last couple of months, their road games have been a little bit easier to watch. But still, they're below 500 overall on the road. Their power play, 23.4%, very good, but their penalty kill, again, below 80 at 78.6%. Their upcoming schedule, they play at Carolina next, then they come home and they play Vancouver. They have 2 games in Anaheim, so they can potentially have 6 points there between Vancouver and the 2 Anaheim games. But it depends on how Vancouver does. Vancouver's on the board for a reason. But yeah, so overall, this record that they have combined with the schedule they have coming up gives Dallas a very good chance. They have 2 games against San Jose. They have the 1 game against Vegas here. They have a couple against Vancouver, albeit the one in Vancouver. I'm probably going to be wearing a Dallas jersey for that. And the reasoning for that is if 2 teams I'm cheering for are playing against each other, I will tend to cheer for the team that I think, the win's more important to. And in this case, I think Dallas makes the playoffs, and I think Vancouver probably doesn't. Now, with Dallas having 14 out of their final 20 games against non-playoff teams, that works to their benefit. Now, the fact they have to play 20 games between now and April 29th works less to their benefit. But if they can survive this, they've got the road trip where they go through Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary. They come home, they play San Jose and Vegas, Arizona and Anaheim. So all four of those teams are below the playoff line. Seattle, Vegas, Arizona, and Anaheim. And of the four, Vegas is one that they're fighting against, but Seattle, Arizona, Anaheim, all sellers at the deadline. So for Dallas, the only way they miss the playoffs is if there's some kind of an implosion. It's happened before. So while I do like Dallas's chances of finishing in the playoffs, and it would be very entertaining to see what they could do in said playoffs, it's going to depend on whether or not they can really truly beat the teams they're supposed to beat and how they handle the amount of stress this is going to put on them. Without Braden Holtby in net, it's a good thing they picked up Wedgwood. Wedgwood's going to be busy over the next 20 games. I would think he plays at least 6 of them. I'll say 6 out of the 20. And for Ottinger, he's going to get a lot more games under his belt before the season's over. Then you get to Vegas. Vegas has played the most games, 66. And that makes it tougher for them to make the playoffs. 34-28-4 is their record. So 34-28-4 is the worst of the numbers, 72 points outside of Vancouver. Vancouver, points percentage-wise, is the worst one on the board. But they're still in the race, right? 28 regulation wins, which is a tiebreaker they have on both Winnipeg and Dallas. They have that on Vancouver as well if it gets to that. Their goal differential is a +4, but they're 3-7 in their last 10. It's been a rough time for Vegas lately. Their special teams, both of them have been below par. Their power play 18.1%, their penalty kill 78.7%. So that's a problem that they've had. And then you look at their upcoming schedule. Their upcoming schedule is not that difficult. They have back-to-back games at Seattle. Then they have back-to-back games against Vancouver. Now, that's after games against Nashville and Chicago first. But yeah, they have the back-to-backs against Seattle, back-to-back against Vancouver. Then they're against Arizona in Vegas. And then they go to Vancouver. So they've got 3 games against Vancouver coming up. Canucks can play spoiler in those. Then they go to Calgary, Edmonton. They're at home against New Jersey, Nashville, San Jose. And then they go on a 3-game road trip to end out the season. Of their 16 final opponents, 10 of them are above the playoff line. Or 10 of them are below the playoff line, sorry. So only 6 of their final 16 opponents are above the playoff line. It's not a bad schedule, but here's the qualifier. Of their last 10 games, they've had plenty of them against teams below the playoff line. They do not have a great record against those teams. They're not scoring goals. They got shut out last night by Winnipeg. And that was after they got shut out the night before as well. There are major problems now with the Vegas Golden Knights. And so I honestly think they should miss the playoffs. Based on what I see on this board, it tells me, yeah, they should miss. They've played 4 more games than Dallas. They're 1 point behind them. And the overall numbers don't seem to benefit them that greatly. Of the 4 extra games for Dallas, they have also 4 extra games against teams outside the playoff spots. But we'll see. Right behind them, with 70 points, they've only played 64 games. So Winnipeg has 2 games in hand on Vegas as well. The Winnipeg Jets, 30, 24, and 10. So they've only won 30 out of 64 games, but what helps them is those 10 points in overtime and shootouts. So that's where the loser points come in, and some people get upset about that if you end up being above the playoff line because of it, but that's the system the NHL set up. They have 26 regulation wins, which is less than Vegas. It's less than Edmonton, but it's more than Dallas or Vancouver. So that definitely benefits them. At home, they're 17, 12, and 2. Away from home, they're 13, 12, and 8. So if they had a few more wins on the road, they're in the playoffs. They don't have them. They have a goal differential of +3. They're 6-3-1 in their last 10. So over their last 10 games, they've got the best record of any team on this board. 1 point better than Dallas, who are 6-4. Their special teams, power play is 21.8%. Their penalty kill has been an issue most of the season, 76.5%. Although there have been some periods recently where it's definitely looked better. And of their 18 remaining games, they have both games against Ottawa still to be played. And this homestand is going to tell you a lot. So they win last night against Vegas. And they've got Ottawa, Columbus, and Arizona. And what's important about that is that those 3 games are all against teams well below the playoff line, But after that, they only have 5 more games out of the remaining 15 that are against teams below the playoff line. So overall, it's 8 out of 18, the same number as Edmonton. But they have 3 in a row coming up at home against non-playoff teams. They're going to want to basically sweep this homestand and make it so that they're sitting there with 76 points in 67 games, which would definitely make things tougher for Vegas and would put the heat on Dallas as well, although again, Dallas does have games in hand on Winnipeg. So for Winnipeg, it's an interesting record that they've fashioned for themselves over the last month to put themselves back in the hunt, and we'll see whether or not they can get over the finish line. The interesting part of their schedule too is that they have like a couple of road games here with Ottawa and Montreal. Then they come home and play Seattle, and then they go to Florida. They play the Panthers, they play Tampa, then they play the Rangers, and they play Carolina. That 4-game road trip could either make or break their season, right? If they're still in the hunt, those final few weeks, that road trip could be what decides whether or not they finish in the playoffs or they finish out. Then you got Vancouver, who have been 4-4-2 over their last 10, and as I've said, they were 2-3-2 on that homestand, which probably sinks their playoffs. They're 30-26-8 overall. They have 68 points in 64 games, so they have games in hand on Vegas. They don't have games in hand on anybody else. They have 24 regulation wins, which is 1 more than Dallas, but they're 5 points back of Dallas, and they've played 2 more games. The math gets really tricky for Vancouver. They're 14-3-5 at home, 16-13-3 away from home. So they're above 500. Their record's not bad. Their special teams, their power play 21.5%. That's not bad. Their penalty kill's been atrocious at times this year, and it's started to look kind of iffy lately. 71.4% currently. And of their remaining 18 games, well, tonight they're in Colorado. That doesn't bode well for them. Then they're in Minnesota, Dallas, St. Louis. So this 4-game road trip is going to tell us a lot. Then they come home and play St. Louis, Vegas, go to Vegas, go to Arizona, play at home against San Jose and Vegas. That's 3 games against the Vegas Golden Knights. And 8 of their 18 games are against non-playoff teams. Keep in mind, 3 of those are against Vegas, who are just below that playoff line. It is a tough schedule for the Vancouver Canucks from here. If they make the playoffs, it'll be heroic. It'll be nothing short of heroic if the Vancouver Canucks somehow scrape together the rest of their schedule and manage to finish above the playoff line. So the question I have is, so basically granting that these teams are in playoff spots and there's not really much chance of them falling out, if you don't agree with that, let me know. If you think that the Kings could fall out or Nashville, I don't know how you could argue that since they have 78 points, but I'm sure somebody might be able to. But let me know who you think ends up winning this race for that final playoff spot in the comment section below. I'm wearing Dallas because I really think Edmonton and Dallas probably end up being the teams. Dallas does have those games in hand, but I really do think Winnipeg's showing a lot of fight right now, and it is tough not to pick Winnipeg. Winnipeg in a first-round series with Colorado, that could be a lot of fun. That could be a really wide-open series, a lot of goals. A Dallas-Colorado series would probably be a little more defensive. Might be a little bit of a tougher watch. I mean, as a Dallas fan, I'd be fine watching it, but I do think that I'll have 2 teams of the 3 that I cheer for, Boston, Vancouver, Dallas. I think that Boston and Dallas probably end up in the playoffs. Vancouver back into the, well, we're waiting till next year, as we usually are in Vancouver, for things to change. So let me know your thoughts. Who do you think ends up winning this race? Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. I do love this time of year. I do love after the trade deadline and we're in the stretch run. And, you know, there's a lot that can change from day to day. So I'm fine with revisiting this a few weeks from now. But it is fun. It's a shame that we don't have this in the East, that the top 8 teams are deciding. It's just a matter of who's going to play who. But I think the West is going to give us a lot of enjoyment from here. So let me know your thoughts, who you think will win. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.